The House managers spoke about rhetoric, about a constant drumbeat of heated language. Well, as I'm sure everyone watching expected, we need to show you some of their own words.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
You got to be ready to throw a punch. You have to be ready to throw a punch.
Donald Trump, I think you need to go back and punch him in the face.
That is the part they never want replayed in full, because once you hear it back to back, the entire moral lecture starts falling apart in real time. For years, we were told that heated political language was not just irresponsible, but dangerous. We were told that words matter, tone matters, and that public officials have a special duty to lower the temperature. Fair enough, that standard sounds reasonable. The problem is what happens when the people demanding that standard suddenly get confronted with their own words, their own clips, and their own history. That is exactly what happened during Trump's Senate impeachment trial, when his lawyer didn't just argue in theory, he pressed play. And before we get into it, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your take, because this is one of those moments where the receipts matter more than the speeches. The setup was simple. Democrats were accusing Trump of creating a dangerous atmosphere with rhetoric. They framed it like this was a one-way street, like one side had a monopoly on inflammatory language, and everyone else was just sitting quietly in the corner sipping tea. But then Trump's legal team came in with the one thing politicians hate most, a highlight reel. Not a complicated legal theory, not some 900-page report nobody reads, just their own words played out loud in front of the country. And that's what made the moment so effective, because once the clips start rolling, the polished speeches disappear. The dramatic pauses don't matter anymore. The camera-ready outrage doesn't hit the same. Suddenly, the question becomes very uncomfortable. Are we applying one standard, or are we just weaponizing outrage when it's politically convenient?
Hatred, animosity, division, political gain, and let's face it, for House Democrats, President Trump is the best enemy to attack.
I want to say this for Donald Trump, who I may well be voting to impeach.
Donald Trump has already done a number of things which legitimately raise the question of impeachment.
I don't respect this president, and I will fight every day until he is impeached.
That is grounds to start impeachment proceedings.
I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America.
I continue to say, impeach him! Impeach 45! Impeach 45!
On the impeachment, Donald Trump, would you vote yes or no?
I would vote yes. I would vote to impeach.
Because we're gonna go in there, we're gonna impeach the motherfucker.
Now pause right there. This is where the whole thing starts to look less like a solemn constitutional process and more like a political campaign slogan that finally got a courtroom, because impeachment was being talked about long before January 6th. It wasn't some last-minute emergency button that nobody wanted to press. For some of these people, it was the plan, the brand, the fundraiser, the rally chant, and the cable news booking strategy all rolled into one. And look, people are allowed to oppose a president. That's politics. People are allowed to think a president committed impeachable offenses. That's part of the system. But don't turn around later and pretend this was all approached with monk-like restraint and deep sadness. Come on. There were members of Congress openly campaigning on impeachment. There were activists chanting it. There were politicians talking about it like it was a trophy. And then, when the trial came around, the same political universe wanted everyone to believe this was only about principle, not politics. That's a tough sell. And here's where it gets even messier. The impeachment argument depended heavily on the idea that rhetoric can lead to real-world consequences. Again, that's not crazy. Words can inflame people. Leaders should be careful. Public figures should know that crowds don't always hear nuance. But if that's the rule, then it cannot only apply when Trump is speaking. That is the entire point. You can't build a case around the danger of political language, then shrug when your own side says things like unrest in the streets, throw a punch, or get up in their faces. You don't get to call that passion when your side does it, then call it incitement when the other side does it. And that's not a standard, that's a costume.
And did you tone down the rhetoric last summer when all of this was happening? Did you condemn the rioters, or did you stand with Nancy Pelosi, who said, people are going to do what they're going to do?
This is a movement, I'm telling you. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after. Destroying property which can be replaced is not violent.
This is an apartment complex on fire.
And it just collapsed. Their building just collapsed.
I have nowhere to go now. These people did this for no reason.
This is just a snapshot of some of the damage that people will be waking up to.
Going up, but police clearly.
I'm proud of New York, and I'm proud of the protests.
There is damage everywhere you look. Honestly, it looks like a war zone.
Heartwarming to see so many people turn out peacefully.
They keep doing it day after day after day. Our country is a nation of protests. The Patriots were protesters.
That section is probably the most uncomfortable part of the whole presentation because it forces people to look at something they usually try to keep separated. When unrest happens on the other side, it's an attack on democracy. When unrest happens on your side, it becomes complicated. It becomes mostly peaceful. It becomes the language of the unheard. It becomes people are angry. It becomes a think piece, a panel discussion, and a moral gray area. But when your political enemies do it, no gray area, no context, no nuance, just condemnation. And that's the game people are sick of. Most normal Americans are not sitting around defending every riot, every broken window, every reckless speech, or every ugly moment from their preferred political team. Most people can hold two thoughts at once. Violence is wrong. Political hypocrisy is also real. But Washington hates that kind of consistency because consistency ruins the business model. Outrage needs selective memory to survive. It needs everyone to forget the old clips. It needs people to only start the timeline when it helps their side. That's why these video montages hit so hard. They don't need a fancy argument. They just remind you what was said 5 minutes ago, and suddenly the room gets very quiet. That is the key point, consistency, because the average viewer can smell the double standard from a mile away. You don't need a law degree. You don't need to be a constitutional scholar. You just need eyes, ears, and a memory longer than a goldfish. If political violence is wrong, then it's wrong when it happens at the Capitol, wrong when it happens at a courthouse, wrong when it happens at a police precinct, wrong when it happens to a federal building, wrong when it happens to a business owner who had nothing to do with any of this. That shouldn't be controversial, but somehow in modern politics, saying apply the same rule to everyone gets treated like a radical position. That's how broken the conversation has become. The standard is no longer what happened. The standard is who benefits if we talk about it. And once politics gets there, truth becomes a prop. Now this part is brutal because it moves from rhetoric to process. For years, objecting to election results was treated differently depending on who was doing the objecting. When Democrats objected, it was framed as defending democracy, raising concerns, protecting voters, or protesting injustice. When Republicans objected, suddenly it became the most dangerous thing anyone had ever seen. Again, we can argue about whether the objections were valid. We can argue about the evidence. We can argue about the tone, the timing, the consequences, and the motivations. But what you cannot do is pretend the act itself was invented in 2021, because it wasn't. Members of Congress had challenged certifications before. They had raised objections before. They had used the floor to make political statements before. And when Trump's lawyer played those clips, the point wasn't that every objection is automatically good. The point was that the outrage machine had conveniently forgotten its own history. That is the kind of clip that makes the spin room work over time. Because once viewers see Democrats objecting to electoral votes, the clean little narrative starts to crack. Not because every objection is the same, not because every situation has identical facts, but because the public was told to treat one category of behavior as unthinkable, even though many of the people saying that had participated in versions of it themselves.
You claim that it's wrong to object to the certification of election results. You, along with your allies in the media, attempted to cancel and censor members of this chamber who voiced concerns and objected to certification. Manager Raskin, you'd been in Congress only 3 days when you objected in 2017. It's one of the first things you did when you got here.
I have an objection because 10 of the 29 electoral votes cast by Florida were cast by electors not lawfully certified.
Is the objection in writing and signed not only by the member of the House of Representatives, but also by a senator?
It is in writing, Mr. President.
Is it signed by a senator?
Not as of yet, Mr. President.
In that case, the objection cannot be entertained.
Mr. President, I object to the certificate from the state of Georgia on the grounds that the electoral votes were not...
There's no debate.
I object to the certificate
from the state of North Carolina based on violations of the Voting Rights Act.
There's no debate in the joint session.
I object to the 15 votes from the state of North Carolina because of the massive voter suppression and the closing of polling booths.
There's no debate. There's no debate.
The objection is in writing, and I don't care that it is not signed by a member of the Senate. I do not wish to debate. I wish to ask, is there one United States senator who will join me in this letter
There
of
is no
objection?
The
debate.
objection is signed by a member of the House, but not yet by a member of the Senate.
Well, it is over.
And honestly, that's why these moments go viral. People don't just react to the facts. They react to the feeling that they've been lectured by people who don't follow their own rules. That's the gasoline. It's not just disagreement. It's the smugness. It's the finger wagging. It's the how dare you energy from people who have old footage sitting around like political landmines. And when those landmines go off, suddenly everyone wants nuance. And that final line really sums up the whole thing. Sometimes the most effective rebuttal is not a speech, it's not a slogan, it's not a clever comeback, it's just pressing play. Because politicians survive by controlling the frame. They want to decide what counts, what doesn't count, when history begins, when context matters, and when context magically disappears. But video ruins that. Old footage is the enemy of political theater. And this is not just a Democrat problem, by the way. Republicans do it too. Every political movement has a memory problem when its own team is on trial. But in this particular moment, Trump's lawyer exposed a very specific contradiction. Democrats wanted to prosecute rhetoric, objections, and political escalation while hoping nobody remembered their own rhetoric, objections, and escalation. That's a hard needle to thread. And the bigger takeaway is not that one side is perfect. Nobody in Washington is perfect. The bigger takeaway is that voters should stop accepting selective outrage as moral clarity. Because it isn't. If a standard only applies to your enemies, it's not a principle, it's a weapon.
The House managers spoke about rhetoric, about a constant drumbeat of heated language. Well, as I'm sure everyone watching expected, we need to show you some of their own words.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
There needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
You got to be ready to throw a punch. You have to be ready to throw a punch.
Donald Trump, I think you need to go back and punch him in the face.
That I thought he should have punched him in the face.
Feel like punching him.
I'd like to take him behind the gym if I were in high school.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
And you push back on them, and you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Please, get up in the face of some Congress people.
If you had to be stuck in an elevator with either President Trump, Mike Pence, or Jeff Sessions, who would it be? Does one of us have to come out alive?
And that's exactly why this trial moment still matters. It showed how quickly the tone changes when the clips are about the other team. It showed how politicians can condemn a tactic on Monday after using a similar tactic on Friday. And it showed that the public needs to keep receipts, because the people giving the loudest lectures are often hoping you forgot the last chapter. So here's the real question. Do we actually want calmer politics, or do we just want our side to be allowed to shout while the other side gets punished for raising its voice? Because if the goal is truly to lower the temperature, then the rule has to apply across the board. No excuses. No, but my side meant well. No pretending riots are noble when they help your narrative and dangerous when they hurt it. No pretending election objections are democracy in action when Democrats do it, and democracy under attack when Republicans do it. Pick a standard and stick to it. That is what people are asking for, not perfection, just honesty. And moments like this matter because they cut through the fog. They remind everyone that politics is full of staged outrage, selective memory, and carefully edited timelines. But when the full clips come out, when the old statements get played, when the receipts hit the screen, the audience can decide for themselves. And that's exactly what scares the political class. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this a fair defense, or was it political theater fighting political theater? Hit like if you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe for more, and keep your eyes open, because in Washington, the clip they don't want replayed is usually the one you need to see most.